Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth,
And I'm Sukhmi.
and we're back for our part two of this episode where we wanted to talk about whether a bachelor's degree is the new high school degree and a master's degree is considered the new bachelor's, and what skills or networking is required to beat the curve from the average person in the labor market.
Yeah,
I think for me, I wanted to specifically talk about my experience because I have been toying with the idea of going to get my master's for probably around a year or two now. I've really wanted to do it. I really do enjoy learning and building my skills within economics, especially because I wasn't necessarily the strongest student. And so I feel like every opportunity to get better is a great opportunity. But something that I've noticed myself thinking about lately, especially with the rise of AI and just knowing that there are a lot of things moving very quickly in the labor market, is whether I actually can afford to take 2 years off to go get my master's while the labor market is moving so quickly and so fast as it is. I'd love to hear your opinion on this as
yeah.
well. And AI continues to build and move, and everyone else is getting more experience and learning with the times. Am I actually, is that an opportunity cost there? And I think in every situation it is obviously an opportunity cost,
Right.
but am I losing something that's actually more valuable in the labor market rather than in my master's?
It's actually interesting that you're saying that because I want to say like maybe about a month ago, I was actually having this conversation with my mom, and I was saying how contrary to the conversation of people choosing masters over going straight into the job market, I went straight into the job market, and I was saying how it's crazy because it's almost been a year since we've graduated college, and I have some friends that are wrapping up like a 1 year program, or even in a year, we have some friends that are going to be getting their masters, and so. I was thinking, wow, we all were at the same trajectory and we all have one degree under our belt, but now I'm in the market and now they have 2 degrees. And I'm like, well, am I falling behind? And so, I mean, it's kind of a conversation of the grass is always greener on the other side. One person's always going to feel like, in theory, they're lacking what the other person doesn't have. And so I think that's kind of where people always say, like, after college, like, you kind of choose your own path, that comes into play. But I think it's interesting. So, what are like some things that you're considering with this conversation? Like, what are some push and pull factors for you when you're thinking
Yeah.
about your decision?
No, absolutely. I think for me, something that we spoke about in our previous episode is making sure that if I do go to a university, I have access to things like internships and co ops where I'm able to gain experience directly with the field I want to work in rather than just gaining an education. Again, I think
Yeah.
an education is number one most important. But at the end of the day, if I'm talking to an employer, I want to be able to talk in their language rather than in an academic format. I think that those are very separate ways to communicate. And I think that as great as higher education is, a lot of the times we're talking in a manner that doesn't actually apply to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
so being able to translate what I'm learning into day to day life, into day to day work, I think is probably one of the most important things. So being able to just gain that experience and also just being able to signal to employers that I do have the experience that they're looking for and that I
Yeah.
don't just come from a higher education background. I think, hey, I have this experience from this company that you know and that you might have worked with in the past or that you've heard in the news is more important, I think, at least in my opinion, than being able to say, hey, I got this degree from this university, which they might not even know or recognize or know their ranking or understand the program. So I think that's probably one of the more important things. And then I'd say the second thing is what am I gaining from a master's degree that I can't be gaining outside of it? And
Yeah.
is that actually the itself the signaling of being able to have a master's, or is it the skills that are verified by a university rather than by, a course online or whatever that is? Because I do think I have that minimum threshold of a bachelor's degree from a very good university. And so what comes next? Is it the networking? Is it the skills that you're building? Is it the signaling from either a top institution or a top firm? Like, which is it that actually makes you the strongest in the labor market? And I think that's also a good question for you, Suk.
Yeah. It's actually funny you were saying that. And in preparation, because this is a question that you're constantly having yourself. And I mean, I wanted to speak on it from a different angle. So I found an article from Purdue also discussing if master's degrees are becoming the new bachelor's degree. And it really focused on the competition in the labor market. So, I mean, this is kind of what we all know, but just to establish more of the framework and context of the article, we are in a post-pandemic era, obviously, as everybody knows, and also in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a lot of technological advancements, and as a result, now employers, at a time I think before they needed employees, now they have the leverage and the resources to now be picky over who they're hiring. That obviously creates the incentive for a student or whoever is wanting to go get the master's degree because they need to distinguish themselves from whoever else. But it's kind of crazy because, like you said, our bachelor's degree is becoming the new high school degree because back in the 40s, the article said about roughly 4.6% of Americans had a bachelor's degree. And as of today, it's a third of Americans. If everybody has a bachelor's degree, how are you any different? But then also, I mean, easily the next solution would be, oh, go get a master's degree, like set yourself apart. But I think there's a weird question and tension of, is a master's degree really going to set you up to be so competitive? Because if that's the logic there, clearly in the 40s to now, that logic showed. And so that's why there's been such a leap in bachelor's degrees. So why won't that now become the new leap? How do you balance that question, and also how do you answer that? Because I feel like education works like a signaling system. So as more people end up obtaining said credential, then the next credential will become the differentiator until it is then, I guess, the underlying similarity, and then everybody goes and gets it. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
How do you? I'm just. I don't. I feel like we're kind of at a point where we're kind of just chasing at this point, and it's because I think in combination with the rise of AI, you really don't know how long your current skills will be useful for. But also, in addition, if every job requires you to have a master's degree, then like where do you stand?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And I actually will say that if you asked me this maybe a year or two ago, I would have been like, yeah, absolutely. Everyone needs a master's at this point. It's the differentiation. But now I would actually disagree with myself. I would say it's more so about your people skills, how well you're able to talk to people, or again, I hate to say, but how well you use AI. I think that's something that employers are always looking for, how well you're able to do your tasks more efficiently rather than how much expertise you bring. I think in the odd scenarios where your expertise actually are within AI and you actually understand the LLMs and whatever that is. But I think as a whole, the skills that employers are now looking for have become very, very different than what they were looking for in the past. And so I don't think that a master's necessarily signals that. I think it could have a lot of benefits, but I don't think that somebody, for example, getting a master's in my situation in economics, well, I mean, a lot of the topics and the ideas that you're learning, could you learn that through AI? Could that be an everyday today that you implement through AI in your work rather than spending 2 years and getting a degree in that? Like, what differentiates that master's from being able to use AI? And although it is sad, and I think that education, again, I keep reiterating this, but it's so
yeah,
important. I think that that's the biggest struggle that I'm having right now is whether that education is beating how fast AI is moving.
that actually kind of teed me up for my next question. How do you think in the past to the present, I mean, even in a matter of 6 months, 6 months to a year, how do you think people were signaling their masters? Was it before primarily for learning, or is it now signaling value in the job market? And to your point now, is it signaling efficiency? Like like how has it changed, and like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that for masters specifically, you could look at it two ways. It's either a stepping stone into a PhD, and then you're an academic for life. You really are focusing on that, even if you work within the workforce and not necessarily within higher education. Once you finish your PhD, you really are, you've spent a lot of your time in academics, and that's the way you'll think. I think in terms of a master's and what it could be used for, I think it definitely is a lot of the expertise that you potentially could bring to the workforce, not necessarily the skills, because a lot of skills are learned on the job. And I think a lot of employers
Yeah,
actually do recognize that, which is a good thing.
that's why you need to be
But
coachable. That's like one thing I feel like they always say, like a good candidate in any position is just coachable.
exactly. Yeah. So I think the master's in the past was number one, you're an expert in your field, or you're getting close to being an expert in your field, which is great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But now it's become so easy for other people to be no, definitely not at the same level as you. I think that without proper education, you'll never get to as knowledgeable as a master's person unless again you teach yourself a lot and you go through a self-paced program. But as a whole, I think it's difficult to say how masters are viewed today, and I also don't necessarily want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I think for me, it's been a difficult, I think,
Decision to toy with.
journey, yeah, exactly, or decision to come to, because again, I don't know how fast the labor market is moving, but I do know how a master's works, but I don't know if it'll be useful in a year and a half to 2 years once I'm done. So that
Yeah.
question is always up there.
Well, I think that kind of closes our discussion, but as viewers and listeners, I kind of want to ask one closing question so you can sit with this as well. So, my question being, do you think the rise of master's degrees really reflects skill demands, or is it mostly a result of competition in the labor market? And depending on your answer, where do you think that'll go with time as time continues and so does technology and really the competition?
That's a great question, Sig. I really like that.
Thank you. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to this week on our take of master's degrees and how universities operate within institutional economics. And we will catch you back on the next episode.